I think the hard work leads into the luck. So um, a hard worker will find themselves in many lucky positions. Okay, my name is Jim Valery, or James Valery, but more commonly known as Jim. I'm the sole director of New Style Developments, and I guess my role is more about the oversight into working with our team, both internally and externally. In development space, it's important that you have the right consultants, but it's also important that you do have the relationship with them to be able to drive them and give them the right input. So it's all about making sure that, I guess, the buck stops with me to make sure that internally and externally we're doing the thing that's delivering the right result for our investors, and making sure everyone's adequately safeguarded, predominantly in the Brisbane City Council, and more aligned to infill developments rather than the greenfield ones. Just feel that it's probably a lot better infill, where I believe that they're a better product. The growth is more stabilised because the market's already established, rather than the fluctuation that you might get in the greenfield areas.
Yeah. For listeners who don't really know or understand what infill versus greenfield is, maybe if you could just give them a bit of a background behind what that is.
Okay, so an infill development is generally referred to as a development that is being done within an area that has got significant infrastructure around it. So it's already got roads, shops, schools, etc. That all the infrastructure is there. It's surrounded by houses that have been there for quite a while. A greenfield development is more going into the outer suburbs of an area. A lot of times you're creating your own roads. At times they will often do master planned estates in those areas where they're creating their own schools and shopping precincts as well. So they're planning quite a large area. Greenfield, you'll generally see 1,000 lot subdivisions in a number of stages, where infill could be anything from a 1 to 2 up to sometimes 30, 40 lot subdivisions. But generally you won't find much bigger than about 30 to 50 lot subdivisions are a big infill development.
Yeah, and that is a huge difference, especially in terms of the capital and the type of developers that do that. Most of the greenfield developments are usually handled by the large ones, I would assume. The larger developers. Yeah.
No, very much so, and they've got a. I guess it's something. The volume's there for them. They've generally been holding a property for a number of years, and there's obviously a lot more. There's a lot more competition, I guess, when you're going against some of the really major players there that have held the property for a long time and bought at the right price. So for me it's about not wanting to go and do that direct competition, and keeping the infill areas where we can be, making sure that our competition is a general mum and dad sale, so we keep our new builds at the right price for the suburb, and it becomes an attractive option for buyers.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Jim, just share with us perhaps what, in say 60 seconds or less, what do you actually do in any given day at the moment?
So any given day at the moment, I guess I do have a team. So we've got Ben, who does a lot of our operational and field work, and who provides our in sales and development management and acquisition areas. So there'll be a lot of interaction with them, overseeing where developments are in all areas. A lot of, I guess, networking and touching base, whether it be through consultants and upskilling, or whether it be just interacting with people and assisting people out in their small areas. But generally it's a lot more oversight in looking at the bigger picture, rather than as much hands-on with the nuts and bolts. That's generally done via the consultants or our external or internal people, and it's more of the oversight and making sure that the total picture is being moving the right way.
Yeah, that's really good. I guess that's all part and parcel of running a development business. You rely very heavily on the team, and you got to do it all, very, very much on those kind of processes as well too.
It's very much. It's it's a team. The strength is from the team, and it's where everything is. As soon as you're reliant upon other people to be doing certain areas, that's got a big impact on how you can deliver yourself.
Yeah, totally. Well, Jim, let's take a step back and get to know you personally. I would love to be able to share your story in the depths of where you were growing up. So let's firstly start, share with the audience, where did you grow up?
I was actually born in Sydney, in Ashfield. Went through to Mudgee, which is at the time it was a farming and a sawmilling area. Now it's quite big with wines and coal mining. So Mudgee in New South Wales country, but moved to Gladstone and started all my schooling in Gladstone.
Okay.
And so, from, probably have the ability to be calling a number of spots home.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned you grew up in Ashfield. How long were you there for before you moved out to Mudgee?
No, so I was born in Ashfield, and I started school at Gladstone. So, it was probably 4 or 5 years old when I was in Mudgee, and then, probably up to about 6 or 7 by the time I got to Gladstone. So, not a great deal of time to plant your feet in those other areas, but yeah, grew up, and obviously they were good areas to grow up in.
Yeah, and what is the reason for moving out to more of those regional country type of towns? Because if you had been born in Ashfield, why not stay in that area?
Obviously, at that age, you're with your parents, and my father was quite into carpentry, dovetail finishing, and some of the higher end cabinet making areas of carpentry. So it was probably an opportunity where he acquired a sawmill out in the Mudgee area. So it was in relation in there. It was the moving of the family out there to Mudgee, to utilise and to be living there while he had the sawmill going. And it was great to be able to run through in a rural area, and running through the fields with my brother. And it was certainly a much more relaxed environment, I suppose, to grow up in
Yeah.
rather than city living.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. I've spoken and interviewed quite a lot of guests in the past who actually grew up in the country, and they didn't have the TVs, they didn't have all that kind of stuff that distracts you in the city. They actually enjoyed and played out on the farm. They could go out in the daylight all the way till dawn, and enjoy all that, even getting on motorbikes and stuff like that at a very young age. When it was
Absolutely, yeah.
it's such an interesting experience, and I think that's the things that our kids probably are missing at this point in time in our generation, unfortunately,
Yeah.
unless you grow up in the country. Okay. And you mentioned you went to Gladstone for school, and from there onwards, did you actually continue on there from schooling and all the way to work, or did you actually go out and start working at a young age?
No, so I grew up in Gladstone, and started to work there the first time. Probably had a significant accident when I was a young fellow there too, and that's where probably in grade 1 or 2, I got burnt through being boys and playing in the backyard with fire and incinerators and aerosol cans and petrol. They sort of don't mix. So grew up in there, did all my education, schooling there. Started doing some work there. Played a lot of rugby league growing up as well. So rugby league was a big part of, I guess, my sports and my social circles whilst growing up. And that also led me, I guess, to be looking at moving out into the coalfields, into Moranbah, inland from Mackay, and to be working in the coal mining industry. It was probably certainly an assistance in playing a lot of rugby league and being able to play it at a level which was attractive to some other teams in regional areas to be going out there and playing football, giving me a start into the coal mining industry.
Wow. So you went to Mackay, which is more Queensland, right? That's is that northern or southern part of Queensland from
It's
memory?
northern Queensland, so
Yeah.
Gladstone's in Queensland as well. It's about central Queensland, and then Mackay's up towards the North Queensland area. So it's about 4 hours away from Townsville. So it's not right up at the peak, but it's certainly up in the northern part of Queensland, yeah.
Yeah.
And Moranbah is a little place about 200 kilometres inland from the coast. So it was out in the, very much the regional areas again where, yes, at the age that we were there, excuse me, there was TV and other things, but they don't have, a lot of the rural towns don't have the added entertainment districts or precincts or things like that. It's about, interacting with people. And, I think for a lot of degrees, is a great way to get up board, because it allows you to connect with people skills and being able to interact with people and talk to people. And that's a big part of life. If you can be talking to people, it's certainly a major head start.
Yeah, I agree. And what age did you go up to Mackay to start playing football and also, into the coal mines?
So I was 21 years old when I went up to Mackay. So had done a little bit of work. Actually worked in Armour Guard, being a bigger guy as a young guy as well. Worked in Armour Guard for a while and did some construction orientated work in Gladstone. But when I was 21, I was moving up to Moranbah and stayed there for thereabouts 15 years and had a great time in Moranbah.
Fantastic. You mentioned you were in the coal mines. What were you doing there?
Generally, it started off with, of all things, explosives. Obviously, having had the incident when I was a young fella and being burnt, then moving into the explosive field, so I got to play with more dangerous toys. But then it was moving into doing a lot of machinery operations and driving the big trucks or the big loaders. And I guess that was good because it gave me a real first exposure into property investing. Obviously, you're on a reasonable wage when you're in the coal mine, so that was the introduction to property investing. And probably the downside or the bad side of property investing, where you do have a lot of spruikers who will come and talk to high income areas and high income people. So I'd probably be fair to say that my first couple of purchases weren't the greatest choice.
All right. Well, that's really fascinating. So you were in the coal mines for a good, say, 15 years or so. You moved yourself through the ranks, and I guess experienced so many different things. And you also said that you started your property investing journey at that point. Was that all sort of halfway through? Like, at what stage in your, I guess, career did you actually start investing into property?
It was quite early, probably. If I moved up there when I was 23, I think we were looking at our first house when we were about 23. So there was obviously the realisation, and I guess as everyone does, the initial plan was to be working up there for a few years and set yourself up and go back to the place you knew, being Gladstone. But it was living there and enjoying the lifestyle, enjoying the interaction with the community, and making, I guess, as you do when you do move, you make new connections and new networks, and it become something that, living in Moranbah there, which is only a town of about 8,000 people at the time. It was great. It was certainly what I enjoyed, and certainly, what I probably still would have done other than progressing and moving into a full-time role with the trade union, which saw me move down to Brisbane. So coming from Moranbah, a town of about 10,000 people, down to Brisbane, it was certainly a major change or difference, but it was, obviously the right move at the right time, and it's allowed me to be continuing to move to where I am now.
That's fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about the journey from Moranbah down to, say, that period of time. You said that you moved to Brisbane, and I think you said you went more into a different space. Tell us a little bit more about that career change. Was there something that happened there? And
I guess it was more along the lines of the coal mining industry is, call it a heavily trade union industry. It's quite militant in that area, and it was from, I guess, the belief that you can't be criticising someone to do something you're not prepared to do yourself, or if someone was elected unopposed to do something. So it's very easy for people to be criticising and complaining about the way someone does something, but unless you're prepared to do it, or unless that person has actually had a competitor, if someone was the only person prepared to put their hand up, it's very hard to criticise the way someone does a role. So at times I wasn't happy where or how people were doing things, and I, with that mindset, put my hand up and said, okay, well, I'm going to run for that position as well. And probably had very little experience in that world, and for whatever reasons, I soon become a shift delegate moved my way through to become one of the lodge executive, responsible in leading the 500 so workforce, and then for that same reason moved down to Brisbane and took on the full-time union role. It was the fact that the only person who nominated was someone that I didn't believe I'd be comfortable with them doing the job, so I either had to put my hand up or accept the way they did the job.
Well, that is a big challenge there. That was ahead of you. How long did that process take?
So that was probably over a period of time. A couple of years, probably 3 or 4 years in working my way up locally, and moving into the full-time role in about 2005, which was, certainly a significant change. And it would be fair to say that at the time I hadn't embraced IT or technology as well as some other people and younger people had. And it was certainly something that I had to really ramp up my knowledge and education into the IT world once I realised that I was elected and moving to Brisbane. It was probably a bit of a shock, but also a bit of a realisation that I had to be changing the way I did things and to adapt to a new way or a new life.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned that as well. What I was going to ask you is, at that point in time when you actually moved into the trade union, I would assume that going to the trade union was a completely different shift in terms of a career change for you. Did that also impact on, say, for example, your earning capacity as well? Because in the coal mine, you had as you said, it was paid quite well, reasonably. But moving into trade union, how did that affect you?
I guess for the trade union, I was in the principle that the union, the mining industry union, was that the officials got paid the same as the people they were representing. So the wage of the officials was always based off what the coal mining wage was, and you didn't have the ability to run for a position unless you also worked in the industry. So it wasn't a matter of people from outside the industry coming in and doing the role. It was people who had been in the industry and knew the industry. They were the only ones who could run for the position, and to make sure that I guess the right people were able to run and were happy to run, that they had to maintain to make sure that the wage was also the same as what they could be earning whilst they were working in the mine. So there was no real change from the wage point of view, but there was probably a bigger looking in, and when you're looking after a workforce or a membership of over 10,000 people, and seeing how many people had also been affected by investing in property in the wrong way, and probably a realisation that when you're out in the regional areas there, it's very easy for people to be going and making unrealistic offers or comments and that, but you don't do the research. I guess you don't do what you need to do. There's not as much availability at your fingertips. We're moving into a different era now, I guess, with the podcasts and a much more robust and established internet where everything can be at your fingertips, and to not learn is your own fault. That's certainly changing, but I guess when you're not exposed and you're not surrounded by that like-minded people, and as you said earlier, that mindset that you need to be doing those areas, it's very easy to be relying upon the views of other people when you're not exposed to the support systems that you can get with inside property groups and property networks. So there was a realisation and seeing that it wasn't isolated to myself. There was a large number of people who had been buying the wrong way and were severely impacted and greatly up to debt and affected whenever there was a change to their workplace because they had bought the wrong way.
That's not good. So I guess you stayed in the trade unions and you helped a lot of the people in the coal mines as well because you came from that background. What was the next thing that you moved on from there?
I guess it was seeing and realisation that it wasn't just myself, it had been to other people. Having immersed myself in Brisbane, I moved into looking at more of a advisory service or a one-stop shop where I could continue helping people in the regions by giving them access to the right consultants, lawyers, accountants, whatnot, based in Brisbane, being able to analyse and look at things in a bit more detail in purchases by leveraging to talk to the right agents rather than just listening to spruikers, and just provide them a platform of information where they could go as a one-stop shop. So it wasn't daunting where they didn't know where they had to look or they couldn't work out where they should look. It was providing them an opportunity to have a large amount of resources and consultants in the one spot to enable them to do some sanity checks on any investments they were wanting to do. And probably it was during that time that there was a realisation that people still liked property and enjoyed property and wanted to be in property, but just a generalised buy and hold option, something they were wanting a bit different, looking at something a bit different to that, and looking at other ways that they could be involved in property rather than just buying and holding. There's probably a level of impatience, whether it be or catching up for lost time and going, okay, well, how can we do something that has got a bit more proactive nature to it.
Mm-hmm. So at what stage did you jump into, say, property development? Because that's what you're doing now.
That's what I'm doing now, and I guess it was, for mine, it was finishing my time at the trade union. I became pretty unemployable, where for working as a blue-collar worker, I would have been a union troublemaker, so there would have been people who wouldn't have liked the idea that I had played an advocatory role looking after workers previously, so they probably didn't want me in the workplace. And the fact that I, as a secretary of a union, I was in charge of the operation, the business world didn't see that to be a business acronym, where that was only a trade union. So there was a realisation of having to create something for myself, and it was moving into the development space, and I've been involved in that since about 2014. A realisation that I, through the choices that I had made, and I wouldn't go back on any of those choices now, but through the choices that I had made, it had led me to the path that I am now, where there wasn't the ability to go back to a safety net and work and getting a wage. It was going, okay, well, I need to embrace the entrepreneurial outlook and create the wage for myself, or create the income for myself.
And that's exactly what you've done over the last few years as well. So that is great to hear. What I wanted to do, Jim, is take a step back and find out a little bit more about your first property. We touched on it very briefly, and that first property that you purchased, as you said, well, those first two investments actually wasn't obviously the best. But could you tell us a little bit about that background? Where was these properties exactly, and how did you find them?
So there was, I originally, me and my partner at the time, we went to saw the local financial planner with a viewpoint of buying something in Brisbane. Bigger market, we thought that was the right option. They talked to us about looking at other options, one of which was a house in the Mackay area in Bucasia Beach, and the second one was a house and land package on Bribie Island. So they were the first two, and it's fair to say that I still owed more on what the properties were paid for. Some 6 or 7 years after I'd purchased them, I still owed more than the property was worth. So in looking at it now, there's a realisation that it was a spruiker, and there was a lot of incentives being paid to various people to get people to put their name on the line. But as a 23-year-old who was on good money in the mines, there wasn't as much of a... I had other things I was enjoying doing. I wasn't, going to be doing all this research. Okay, yeah, cool. I'm going to take the advice of that expert. That's what we'll do. And I can continue to do what I was enjoying doing, playing football and enjoying life. So there wasn't the research that needed to go into it. I think at the time they were talking about Bribie Island. It was one of the last estates available in Bribie Island, which was over 10 years ago. And I do know that they're still opening up new estates in Bribie Island now. So um, the belief that it was the last lot of house and land available in that area without doing the research was certainly an attractive idea. The fact that they're still releasing lots there now makes me realise that that's something I should have looked at a lot more deeper.
Yeah, it's a scarcity mindset that they're trying to sell to you, and unfortunately, without the knowledge and the due diligence, as you explained, that was probably a challenge that we discovered. With those, do you still have
Absolutely.
those properties, or did you end up selling those?
No, I'd sold those properties and moved on to look at different things through various things with the timeline in your life. They're ones that aren't in the portfolio now. No.
Okay, and are those particular properties, were they initially for investment or for you to live in?
No, they were certainly both investment properties. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And then I guess from there, you've moved into property and so forth. Since then, how many properties would you say you've purchased in your property portfolio?
Um, as I said, it's probably more of a in the development space. It's not so much about going and investing or purchasing properties per se. It's certainly we're looking at the opportunity of holding some of the stock we produce rather than going out purchasing. But certainly purchased a number of properties for developments, but not specifically purchased properties just for the viewpoint of holding them myself. That's something that I'd rather realise the benefit out of the developments we do.
Sure. So how many properties would you say you've purchased and developed in the last, say, 6 years or so?
The last 6 years, we've probably done in excess of 12 or 13 properties, probably in excess of $30 million worth of transactions, either buying or selling property. So had a little bit going on.
Yeah. And tell us about the type of developments that you've done as well.
So have done an apartment development previously, also townhouses previously. Have done a new build, a higher end new build, and land subdivisions. But it's generally, I guess, through the path and the realisation the land subdivisions are the area that I do want to play in as you hone your skills further within the development space. That's certainly the area that we are focused on now, and that's our primary. You could never say that you wouldn't explore something else because you don't know what is around the corner. There could be something coming up that's just too good to refuse, but our focus is certainly on the land and the house and land options, providing the land that the builders can then package it up and utilise various selling methods to make sure that we can sell out the stock and look after the investors who do come on board.
Okay, so just to clarify, your main focus for new style developments at the moment is mostly on land subdivisions. You buy a parcel of land, subdivide it, and then you partner with a builder to be able to build those land and house packages. Is that how?
No, we'll utilise a number of builders to provide people opportunities. The build is certainly something that should be up to the buyer as to who they want to build through. Sometimes there will be people who will be buying it through investment channels and they will already have something packaged up, but it's always in a two-part contract where they settle on the land and then they have a contract with the builder. Number one, that provides them a better stamp duty opportunity because you're paying stamp duty on the land only, but it also provides them the ability to utilise an alternate builder if they wish to, or to utilise a builder where there has been designs packaged up as well.
So just to understand and clarify, so you do offer building services as well. So if the buyer comes to and purchase the land from you, they can also build through your company as well?
Not through our company, through the relationships that we have with various builders. So we do work on having relationships to give people choice, and we can generally advocate on behalf of our seller to try and get the right price. But I mean, generally there's packages done up that, one block might have 5 or 6 different builders who have got a design on there, and the buyer might choose which one works best for them, or they might choose to engage with the builder themselves. It depends on how much time that person wants to put into it, whether they want to be utilising something that's already been designed or whether they want to design their own place.
Interesting. So, Jim, let's also talk a little bit more about the developments that you've done. As you mentioned, you've done more than a dozen type of developments as well, from units to townhouses and so forth. So you would have experienced quite a lot of, I guess, interesting ups and downs and so forth. Share with us one maybe interesting or maybe one of your worst, I guess, development type of stories. Love to hear about that.
I guess it was looking at one that we did in Stafford, which was a few years ago now, and it was on a busy road, and we had done developments on a busy road previously, and the realisation and going, okay, well, we were aiming, our goal was to have the lowest house and land or land availability in the suburb. So we knew we were at the bottom of the suburb, and we were going to have the cheapest available land in the suburb, which was reasonably close to the city, and the cheapest houses available. I believe that the generalised the houses in that area were selling at about 540, 550,000. We were working on the idea that they were 520,000. So we were going to meet the bottom of the market. It was at the time that the Royal Commission into banking happened, and just the availability of credit just dried up remarkably. And there was a significant learning for us that once there is that credit shortage, those people who can still get credit move up, and that they're looking for the A-class properties or the B-class properties or the C-class properties, but there's no one left looking at the D-class properties. So they became properties that we certainly pushed and marketed considerably, and essentially they were significantly lower than we had hoped for, and based on what the evidence was that they would have achieved. So as a company, we did we had a learning not to be doing things on busy roads now, regardless of discounting, because in times that money is hard, people can push their way up to the best lots rather than just being so reliant upon set price. Yeah. Everyone's prices has to come down, and there's no one left at the bottom. So yes, we did. We had a project that didn't perform, and it performed negatively, but that's something that we absorbed as a company to make sure that none of the investors had to have any absorption of that nature. They still, excuse me, they still had their interest return if they were on an interest return basis, and that's something we have to wear. So as a business, yes, we won't do those areas anymore, and that was certainly a learning for us, and it's one that we paid for. But number one is that you've got to make sure that the people that you work with, significantly the investors, there's a rule, isn't it, that an investment is about the return of capital and then a return on capital. So we want to make sure that there's always a return of capital, and we hope to make sure that the return on capital is positive.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm also wondering, and you kind of did touch on this as well, to try and enter the market and beat the competitors, but why go down the path of actually discounting those properties initially? Could it have been possible to offer greater big blocks of land and at a higher price point, or was that not a possibility?
This was just a smaller development, so it was only, excuse me, 2 house renovations and a back lot. So we combined both backyards and created one lot of land, and it was 2 renovated homes. So there was no real ability to do much more. Yes, there could have been a holding of the stock, and we certainly did explore that. But the structure that was set up, and given that there was a few different investors, that isn't what they signed on for. So it was something that we had to go, okay, well, we'll sell them at a loss rather than having someone sign up for something that they didn't want to do originally. So there was options that we could have looked at holding. We certainly did look at conversions into multiple, mini boarding houses or key person accommodation. But at the end of the day, there was, I guess, fatigue from people in saying, okay, this has been going, this is longer than we want. So it was a matter of going, okay, we have to execute the finalisation of the project for them.
That's fair enough. And I guess we want to take a look on the positive side and look at the journey from also some moments that you may have had some great success amongst the challenges that you had. Share with us perhaps a moment in time where you had this great aha moment in your journey.
I guess the aha moment was through doing the education, and it's important to continually improve yourself no matter where you are and what you're doing in personal development. We are our own best asset. So it was through the education, it was volunteering at other educational events and giving something back. And it was making sure that we had the right team. So it was something that we'd previously done. And you'll always originally be a one-man band originally. Excuse me, through having the right team there in place now, the aha moment for me, I guess, is that, excuse me, I've got a mother who hasn't been well, and she's doing chemotherapy at the moment. She lives in Bundaberg, but I've been able to move her down to Brisbane and allow her to reside with us, or with me and my son. And I've got the ability and the time now to be able to provide assistance and care in running her to the hospital and assisting her to be moving through that phase, purely because of the team. So I guess the aha moment for me is the realisation that we've got the team there now that enables me to have outside areas if something important comes up, that I've got the comfort that we have got the team there to be able to continue what we need to do as a business. But if there's something comes up in a personal nature, there's also the ability to attend to those matters as well.
And I'm guessing that because of all the systems that you set up in place, the great team that you've built around you, that has given you be able to have that freedom as well to be able to do those things. And I'm sorry to hear about your mother as well. And I'm hoping that things go well as well for that.
It's having that team. It's having like you said, the systems, the right selection process on sites, making sure that we're doing things well to keep moving forward, and having those resources to make sure that we can, because there's always a time where something comes up in our life, and if we've made the right structures around ourselves, we can deal with those things without losing any momentum or pace or risk to anyone.
I'm also interested to learn a little bit more about, say, for example, the units in the townhouses developments. What interested you to actually go down to develop those type of properties? Tell us about one of those examples or stories behind that.
I guess there's a it's whether it comes from the time that we're given Lego blocks as little kids, and we always seem to like to build something. It seems to be more fun. You can do a land subdivision and you can look back, and it's not as though you sit there and feel as though you've created anything. It's dirt on the ground or grass on the ground. So that was there before you got there. So all you're doing is shifting the boundaries around. There's no real look at that. I can come back in 3 years' time and look, we constructed that. So I think inside most people, especially boys and men, is that there's always that desire to be building something and going, okay, yep, that was, I love the colour I picked there, or I love something I picked there. I mean, I don't have those aspects, and I avoid renovation because I've got no ability to look at colours, but I've got the team members to do that. But the realisation and looking back and going that you've built something and you've created something is certainly, at some point, it's always of interest to us. I guess it's a realisation for me now that to do those style of developments, I am very reliant upon the builder as well. I can do everything right myself, and if the builder doesn't play their role, or if they make mistakes or they don't build things to the right quality, that has the ability to affect the overall project. And if it's my project, it's my name, it's our company name. So I guess it's more, that's the viewpoint in moving more to the land subdivisions. It's something we can control. It's totally within our control. It's in our skill set. We're not relying upon others to provide such a significant component of the deal. And
And
I have had builders go into administration and things like that, and it becomes quite hard. So, just from our point of view, it's about the realisation that we're comfortable with our skill set and the skill set of our team. We don't want to be introducing further risk into a deal, especially a deal where there will be investors involved. Yes, we will do some construction elements, and they'll generally be along the lines, if we're looking to hold stock, we'll certainly do builds on that stock for us to hold and to create passive income. But we'll probably restrict those areas to ones that we're looking at holding rather than what we're looking at doing with, utilising a syndication or investors.
It's fascinating what you've said, and it sounds like your business or development company has evolved over time to take from the units to townhouses to subdivisions. And I think once you've sort of done those and you understand the process involved, I get a lot of developers who seem to go back to land subdivisions because it is a lot more control. It's a lot. No, I wouldn't say it's easier to manage, but at least that way there's a lot more knowledge behind that. It is a slightly different way to market it, and as we know from experience working with a few other developers, you've got to have that and also understanding of how subdivisions work, because it's a different way to sell land compared to selling something that is physically already built as well too.
Oh, absolutely. Land's not very sexy. That's why, you do something with getting someone with the right design on there, because then you can leverage off the beautiful looking house, and you're selling land but you're talking more about the house. Purely is because land, it doesn't excite people. Yes, people want to live in a certain area, they want that access, but to physically put a picture up with a block of grass isn't that exciting. Where if it's a beautifully designed home, it certainly creates more of an emotional attachment. So you're very much right in that. There's a specific way, and I think it's important where a lot of people who are trying to sell land and house and land think all they need to do is put it on realestate.com and it'll sell, and that's certainly not the case. It is a specific skill set, and a lot of local agents don't have that skill set. You've got to make sure that you do pick the right people, I believe, and you've got the right backup internally to be driving those people, which is what we have through our team.
Excellent. So what I'd love to sort of delve into now is more the strategic side of new style developments. Is there any specific type of land subdivisions that you target at, like, the block sizes? How do you go about finding your type of lands to do your developments? Can you share a little bit more behind that, what you do?
Yeah, we certainly have moved, more away, and everyone starts doing the 1 and the 2s and 1 and the 3 lot subdivisions. We've moved away from that now, where we're certainly looking for preferably 5 or 6 lots or more, up to your 30 or 40. We have got 2 7-lot subdivisions, an 11-lot subdivision, and a 30 lot or 33 lot subdivision. So they're certainly the areas we want to play in, and especially in Queensland. If people are doing subdivisions, there is a need to understand that the way that you do a 5 lots or less is different the way that you do 7 to 10 lots, and that's different the way that you do 11 to 30 lots. So if you're doing 5 or less lots, you don't need to have disclosure plans, you don't need to have a development approval. You can be selling from the word go. So that gives you, if the development takes you 9 months, that gives you 9 months to sell. Let's say it's a 4-lot subdivision, you've got 9 months to sell 4 blocks of land. Where if you're doing a 7-lot subdivision, you've got to get the DA approval first and have the disclosure documents before you can start selling. And that project, whilst it might take you 12 months, you've only got 6 months to sell them, because you've lost that first part during the development approval stage. So you've got more lots to sell in a shorter time frame. So it is important to have those sales systems in place once you're starting to jump, into disclosure area.
Yeah, it sounds like it is a completely different ball game once you actually jump from 4 to 7. And it sounds like it's the same thing with commercial loans, and from residential to commercial loans, same thing. Like commercial, I think it starts at about 3 or 4. And once you start going up there, the loans just completely change, and the structures and so forth. So there's a different ball game altogether. So you mentioned the largest one you've done, it was doing right now is the 30-lot subdivision. You've got something as small as 11 and 3 and 4. Are they all located in Brisbane that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, we try and focus on Brisbane City Council as a whole. And obviously people will talk about Brisbane being Brisbane, the wider group, which might include other councils like Logan or Moreton Bay, but we try and work within Brisbane. We're very lucky in Queensland that, Brisbane is such a large council area. So it's got the one set of planning legislation. I'm very comfortable with that planning legislation, and I believe that I know it quite well. Other councils, you've got to learn how to drive their online systems. You've got to know the subtleties or differences in their planning legislation. I prefer to focus on Brisbane. It's a very large council. There's plenty of opportunities in Brisbane. So, that's certainly the area that we focus on because of that. I feel sorry for, people in Melbourne and Sydney where you've got such small council areas, and you can walk for a kilometre, and the rules change on what you got to do in a development. So it's be a lot harder there where we are blessed in having such a Brisbane. It may not be the biggest city, but I think it's the biggest council in Southern Hemisphere, I think, or at least our region. So that does give us the ability to learn the legislation, know it well. We've got a large area to go from, so that provides a foundation for our prospecting. And people forget that property is a people game, so I do most of my networking and relationship building with agents. Strangely, I don't go and door knock. I don't go and send letters out like most people or most developers do, but I work very strongly with my relationships. And if you can maintain, and that probably comes from the skill set you learn, and being in the bush, in the regional areas, is you've got to learn and you've got to be comfortable talking with people and interacting with people. So having that comfortability and learning those skills through my previous time, makes that my strong point in dealing with people, talking to agents, having those relationships and doing the right thing by people. And that leads us, along with the time of having the game, but it certainly leads us to be lucky when we get a lot of opportunities. And I guess I say lucky, but the more you work, the luckier you get. So, it's an easier to say it's luck, where, really it's probably an acknowledgement that the team's working very well. But yeah, we do get a lot of opportunities presented to us that certainly keep us going.
Okay. It's interesting because that was actually one of my questions, is how do you go about prospecting, as you said, or do you go about finding your development sites? So it's about having those strong relationships with those real estate agents to actually bring those sites to you. So is there a way that you work with the agents, as you mentioned? Is it like that you say, this is the kind of block sizes that I'm looking for, or do they just send you deals and you go, okay, this works out? Like, how's that relationship work?
I'll certainly talk to them quite detailed about specifics, and if someone's comfortable with the legislation and that, so we'll look at a suburb, we'll download all the right size properties, we'll do an assessment quickly, get rid of ones that haven't got the right frontage, or they've got flooding, or they've got other restraints which means they can't do it. A lot of people then will go and door knock themselves, or go and send letters out. So everyone knows how, regardless of how people do it, once they know how to do a suburb analyst to shortlist the suburb to work out which ones are the right properties to target, a lot of people will then try and target themselves. We've only got so much time. So my belief is that if I can have strong relationships with agents, I'm happy to give them my list, and I'm happy to pay them as a buyer's agent. I'm happy for them to be a listing agent, however they want to work it. They deal with interactions with homeowners all the time. The homeowners straight away have arguably a higher level to, a real estate agent is probably slightly higher than a developer in the people's views on ethics. Whilst I would say that, there are developers, and I'd like to think we are one that do have strong ethics, but everyone thinks that there's, these greedy developers, or this and that. So an homeowner who gets approached by a real estate agent is probably happy to, they're the industry expert from what people think. So we have that conversation starting with an agent rather than ourselves, because yes, we do want to then get brought into the meeting and have the conversation more personalised, but we've only got so much time in the day. So if I can be working with agents who do that all the day, every day, and they prospect, I'm happy for them to prospect from me.
That's excellent. And that's a smart strategy, actually, because at the end of the day, you're able to leverage and focus on what you do best, which is to focus on the development side. Whereas, going out, finding out the sites is always a challenging part. And I've done that process, and it's hard work. And sometimes you get frustrated 12 months down the track, you still haven't found something. But if somebody can be working your side to have that relationship to do that for you, then it would save a lot of time. The only challenge, and I've experienced this as well, and I'm sure a lot of listeners also understand this as well, is how do you actually get that relationship? Because some agents just don't want to waste their time, because they don't know if you're definitely going to be buying. They want to make sure that you are qualified. Just like any buyer, a buyer could just come in and say, look, I'm interested in that property, but they're not even pre-qualified. They don't have cash to be able to buy, or finance ready and so forth. How do you give the incentive for the real estate agent to actually work for you to go and find the sites?
I think it comes down to that can be a time thing sometimes. I'm sure there's been people who at some stage have, the guys at some stage may well have had a young lady who caught their eye, never had to do a lot of work before that young lady had any intention in wanting to, get to know them. So, it's, again, we're people. You've got to put in the time, you've got to put in the effort. So you've got to show the agent, yes, initially you might spend a lot of time going and having catch-ups with them. If they give me something, I'm going to put an offer in regardless. My offer might be way too low, but I want them to know that I'm prepared to pull the trigger. I'm prepared to put an offer in, and I need to give them the respect that they've taken the time to contact me. So I need to take the time to actually review it and give them an offer back or feedback back on where I think the price is. A lot of times my price is going to be vastly different to where they want, but at least I'm showing them the respect. And once an agent is comfortable that you're treating them as a serious person as well, and you start doing the little things right with them, you start to feel you do feel a form of bond. People like people, so if someone feels as though you're doing the right thing to them all the time, it forms a loose, I wouldn't call it a friendship, but it forms a, an ability to interact on a much deeper level or a much more friendly level.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's a good point that you've raised. So say that, for example, the agent has come back to you and said, Jim, great, we've got a site here for you, and you're happy, with having a look at it. What is, say, for example, your due diligence process in order to make a commitment to those sites? Because, there's obviously, you can't just go commit to buying the site without ensuring that it is actually going to be fit for you, to ensure that you are going to make, profit on a site like that.
It comes down to the site, obviously. So the more constraints the site shows when you're doing the research. So, we've got some that you'd happily go unconditional on right away, because what the legislation says. You build up your network. I can talk to my town planner straight away. I can talk to my civil engineer straight away. As you get into a bigger site, it's going to take a little bit more time, and I think people understand on bigger sites it's going to take a little bit more time, but realistically, as a developer, we're going to want to say that this is such a complicated site, we need so much more time, because we want things to be in our favour in having the right to buy them, but not needing to buy them. We don't have to buy them because we're still under due diligence, so we wanted the safety way. If push comes to shove, there's very few sites that you couldn't be unconditional on within 30 or 60 days. unless it's a major, massive, big site. But if we look at our 32 lotter in Tagum, we're probably talking about 60 days due diligence. We have done some due diligence beforehand, but we're also talking to the right consultants in that time to make sure that we're very comfortable.
So just wondering, say for example, when we're going up to like larger subdivisions, 10 plus, 30, etc., do you actually go and purchase the site outright, or do you actually consider using like a property option to be able to purchase that, or not purchase it, but just to give you that time?
Ideally, you would. Tagum is one that we've done it. It's 2 sites by the same owner. One site we are settling on. The second site we have got an option on for 12 months to allow us to get the DA. So that's a negotiation and one that we're able to have. Options can scare a lot of people who aren't well versed in property. So being able to explain that and talk to them through it, and I guess it comes down to how well you can explain it. But there's always some people who they want the certainty because they've made a decision they want to sell. They've made a decision that they're ready to move on to the next phase of their life, and they want to start picking where they're going to live, but they can't realise that dream until such time as they're unconditional. So yes, there's times I think options can work and do work, and ideally based, that would be something I would love to do for every deal. But it's not always going to work. And and again, if we come back to property being a people game, is that we need to actually think about things from the seller's point of view sometimes, and not always try and force them to do what we want to do. If we're happy to work with them, and we'll have a better relationship with the seller as well. So ideally we'd like it, but we can't always get it.
Of course, yeah. I mean, and it's a little bit more of an advanced strategy for a lot of just, generally just across the property side of things. And that's why I can understand why it'd be a bit of a challenge for some people to understand.
Yes.
In terms of, say, funding, to get these kind of property deals, unless you've got a huge treasure chest of cash sitting in a bank account, how do you go and approach to actually fund these type of deals at this point in time?
Yes, I do. So we generally utilise provide opportunities for investors as well as financiers' money, as well as your own money. So it's a combination there. We do have a good list of investors who always like to know what opportunities we have coming up, and I from mine, and I see it as an opportunity. So it's not, a lot of people will sit there and go, okay, I feel bad about going and asking someone to put money into something, but it's an opportunity. I'm presenting someone with an opportunity, and they can take it or not take it. So we do have a list, and we put it out to our list once we have something coming up. But you also need to continually expand that list as people change their mindsets and change where they're going, and or invest it on something else. So someone who is wanting to invest in property isn't just going to talk to me because my deal may not suit them, or my deal may not be ready for them at the right time they're ready. They don't want their money sitting there waiting for me. So if I haven't got an opportunity for them at that time, they'll be looking at who else has got an opportunity. So, we have to work on the idea that we're always going to be continually reviewing and looking and providing the opportunity for other people, because whilst we have got some people there, we can never be sure when we start negotiating that they're the right people. In saying that, I'm always confident that we're going to be able to settle on a deal. If I'm not confident, I'm not going to put it on the contract. So, there is, certainly opportunities out there, and I'd like to think that we're providing a reasonable opportunity, and our general number is around 15% per annum. Or we've also introduced during COVID, we were forced to rethink and change the way we look at things, and so we've introduced the cash flow option, where someone can take their interest paid monthly to compensate them and to increase their own cash flow. So that's generally about 1% per month, and they can continually get their cash flow increased by their interest payments every month. So it comes down to what suits the investor as well. So it can't always be about what we want. It's about going, okay, how can we work together? Because it's a long-term game, and if we can be working together in the long term, we want to make sure that we do consider what their needs are as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good strategy as well too, because it allows you to be able to work very closely with investors, plus also to be able to put together an opportunity that, you know, it's win-win for you and them as well. Great. So Jim, let's talk a little bit more about, I guess, your motivations and also mindset behind this. Maybe let's share with the audience, what's been your why at this point in time? Because now you've done a number of developments and, you know, you've successfully been able to complete a lot of them, you know, in different climates over these last few years. What's your why behind this?
I mean, my why is in having something set up that, you know, it's a generational thing. I've got my son who works with me as well. At some point, I'd love to be sitting there and sipping beers at the pool and watching him do the work. So, you know, not really, because I think I'd still be bored and I'd still want to do things. But I mean, it's about making sure that you can set things up or have a foundation that, you know, not only your son, but also the future generations can benefit from them. And it's not about getting a handout. So, you know, the young fella works in there and, you know, he'll get some of the rewards as well. But it's about setting up the foundation, and, you know, I'd like to think by the time he's 30, he'll have 4 or 5 properties in his name and, you know, a new car, and there'll be very little debt on those properties. So that will be a good foundation for him, and that's a driver for me.
Fantastic. And speaking of, say, resources and maybe mentors over this period of time, are you able to share who has been key pivotal points for you along your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do education. I've been doing education through Young Ewan at Advanced Property Strategies, which has been great. And, you know, there's also, I guess, like-minded being Matt Jones, who runs the Brisbane Property Networking Group, and more so, you know, does also joint venture boot camps where it's about getting in there and delving in it. And you know, Jill, who we both know, works with both groups as well. So it's about understanding, you know, that mindset as well. But I guess I initially went into and doing the advanced property, doing the course with Young. And his comment is always that it's 70% psychological in development, and, you know, maybe 20% skill and 10% time, or 10% skill, 20% time. But I always had a disbelief, and might have been my viewpoint of what psychological was different to what Young is putting out there. And, you know, I was picturing getting up in the morning and saying 10 times I'm going to be successful, or doing those things there, which don't really resonate with me at all. So there's certain areas that I probably don't resonate, but I guess in the realisation of psychology and the 70%, it's about being able to push through, it's being able to have that why reason to keep going, it's being able to take the step. There's a lot of people out there who are highly educated but don't have the mindset to be able to take that step and expose themselves to something because they won't trust themselves. So it's certainly that 70% psychological, which is really coming to me quite a bit now, and I probably understand it a lot more than I did at the time. But I'd say they would be the primaries in you know, from a mentoring or education. And I'm in Young's Diamond Group, which is the high level group for himself as well. So that's something that I'm continually doing. And whilst I have, you know, done a significant depth of projects, it's the time that we think we know everything that we start going backwards. So, you know, we don't know everything. We always can learn, and we should always want to learn. And if we have that mindset where we continually want to learn, we'll always be doing better and improving ourselves, rather than, you know, resting on our laurels thinking we know everything. Because the world changes, property market changes, the ways to do things changes. So we do need to continually to evolve. So it's about making sure that we can continually having that personal development.
And that's absolutely right. I totally agree with you with that, because most of it is between our two ears. And if we can actually ensure that we train that, educate that, and grow that, most of the things just fall into place. And, you know, I can't say it more than enough, as you said.
No, absolutely. And, you know, and realise that, you know, things we learn change, and there's a new app, or there's a new way to do things, or there's a new legislation that comes in place. So we've got to adapt and change that as well. You know, we don't have to do things exactly the same as someone else, but, you know, if we can embrace that mindset and that the idea that you can do it, you know, do it your way. You know, take the learnings from other people, but adapt it to your way, because we've all got our own personality traits. You know, mine being that I prefer interacting with agents. Other people are really successful in doing the letter approach. So adapt it to your personality.
Great. So say let's, for example, take yourself back, say 10 years ago, and, you know, you could actually ask yourself a little bit more about some of your property journeys, or talk to him about it. What do you think you would have said to him 10 years ago?
Well, I think 10 years ago it would have been, you know, the importance of continual education, but also the importance of getting the right advice to allow holding stock at an earlier time frame. So I would have liked to have been holding stock a while ago as well. And, you know, for whatever reasons, it was something that I didn't see as an important factor. It's certainly something I would like to have been able to go back and tell myself 10 years ago that, you know, there's a need to be holding stock as well. But they probably be the two foundations: is continuing the education and continuing to improve yourself and make sure that you know, the property's worth more than the cash sometimes.
Totally. That's always hindsight. We wish we all bought more properties. We wish we did more of this. It's yeah, I think really good advice, and you can start today. You know, everyone can do it. Looking forward to the future. What are you most excited about, say, in the next 5 years?
I mean, I'm excited about the Brisbane market as a whole. I really do believe that we've got a good four years at least coming up. There's been significant cash, you know, coming in from COVID. We had an underlying demand in the market prior to COVID. There's been changing in the funding legislation, which means that there's about to be an abundance of private money coming in as well. So I think there's a pent-up demand, and there's a demand there. So for me, the market, we've got some great projects in the books, so that's an exciting to be having good projects moving into what I believe will be a great market, and to continue to move forward that way, and actually hold some as well.
That sounds great. Now, Jim, you've achieved quite a lot already in such a short period of time as well. You know, most developers have been in the industry for more than 10, 20, 30 years. And, you know, in a short space of time, you've developed quite a number of properties and successfully done it as well. How much of this success do you think has been of skill, hard work, and intelligence? And how much of it has been because of luck?
I think the hard work leads into the luck. So a hard worker will find themselves in many lucky positions. So as I said earlier, for me, it was the fact that I didn't have that fallback option. You know, I come out of, you know, being a Queensland Secretary of a Trade Union, which made me pretty much unemployable from the eyes of the generalised public. There was a realisation when I put my name down for a job as a fill-in job at the airport car parking, and I was told that there was a high level of applications, and sorry, I didn't make the cut this time. That was a realisation that if I couldn't even get a job parking cars, given what I've done previously, that it was time that I certainly had to make sure that I created my own path. So, you know, there was an enormous amount of hard work in there, which certainly made an ability to get luckier now, but that luck's coming from 3 years of hard work. You know, the skill set wasn't there. You know, no one's born knowing how to do what we're doing. No one's, you know, it's not something that we we learn subdivision or we learn these skills in school. We don't learn these skills from our parents. The financial wisdom doesn't come from growing up. You know, there's probably some households that does, and I mean, there's certainly some. You know, if I look at stereotypical, I guess it's certainly Chinese households are far better at providing that financial blueprint into their children more so than a lot of Europeans. It's not so much sought after of, and that's not purely restricted to stereotypical of the Chinese. There's Jewish are renowned for being good at finance as well. So there's certainly some people who do get that blueprint, but generally speaking, most people don't. So we don't have that. We don't have those skills, those learnings, that knowledge. They're things that we have to acquire, and they're only acquired through hard work. And yes, there'll be times that we do acquire those skills and we benefit from them. And I certainly think that we're benefiting now from hard work and the skills that we've been able to acquire. Yes, you can sit there and say, I was talking to a few consultants before I probably meet up, and they were saying that we seem to have a lot of projects on the books where there's a lot of people struggling. So there'll be some people who sit there and go, that's probably down to luck. But again, I'd like to think that luck's come from hard work in establishing the right networks. So it's not lucky that a certain person will tell me about a site, because I've done the time to build up the relationship. So, I think luck is very, very, very unlikely to have an impact into things that we do if we do them well.
Well said. So it's been a pleasure to be able to have you on the podcast, Jim. If listeners want to reach out to you and find out a little bit more about what you've been doing as well too, what's the best way they can connect with you?
I mean, we've got a website called newstyledevelopments.com.au. They can be reaching out. I'm not sure whether you're able to share my details. I'm more than happy for people to share my details if that's the case. We've got a little Brisbane City Council subdivision flowchart that people can have if they want. You can be providing that to people. Equally, we do have a generic email address being admin@newstyledevelopments.com.au. So we have a Facebook page, New Style Developments. So through any of those mechanisms and or through any of the connections that you're able to be assisting with, they're able to contact us in that manner without any dramas at all.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for coming onto the podcast today. It's been a real pleasure to be able to hear your story and also for you to share what you've been doing as well. And I thank you so much for that as well.
No, thanks for your time, and thank you to yourself and the great show that you have in Property Investory.
Thank you once again.
All right, cheers, mate.
Cheers.